The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot, and for a heartbeat everyone froze. The old man's weathered cheek bore the red imprint of fingers, but his pale eyes never wavered. He'd survived frozen mountains in Korea, where the dead outnumbered the living, where men's blood froze before it hit the snow. This was nothing. What the young veteran didn't know, what nobody in that small-town diner knew, was that in 72 hours, 6 leather-clad bikers would roll into town, and the old man's estranged son would finally come home after nearly 4 decades of silence. William Cooper's hands trembled slightly as he held the Purple Heart that morning, the metal cold against skin that remembered different cold, the killing kind that turned men into ice sculptures on Korean hillsides. December 1950 rushed back without warning. Artillery thunder across snowfields, the screams of dying Marines, his rifle bolt frozen solid when he needed it most. A truck horn outside his small house yanked him back to the present. He returned the medal carefully to its box, alongside the Medal of Honor wrapped in cloth his late wife had embroidered, the one he never displayed. President Eisenhower's letter lay beneath it, paper thin with age and handling. "Another morning," he whispered to the empty room. At 81, his routines were carved in stone. Up at 6:30, shaved with the same razor from 1953, dressed with military precision. Today he wore the wool cardigan Margaret had given him that final Christmas before cancer claimed her. Outside, the town of Milltown wore its economic decline like a poorly fitted suit. Once sustained by steel mills, now it survived on memories and stubbornness. His 1989 sedan started reliably, the dashboard clock reading 8:05, right on schedule. The Victory Diner occupied the corner of Main and Factory Streets, its neon sign missing letters but still glowing with defiant pride each morning. He parked in his usual spot, third from the left, where he could see both entrance and street, old habits from a war that never quite ended in his mind. Rose had been pouring coffee there for 40 years, her blonde hair now silver, but her smile unchanged. "Morning, Bill," she called as the door jingled. "The usual?" He nodded, settling into his corner booth. The meal had a name, Joe's Special, named for the radio operator who died beside him in Korea. They'd promised each other in a frozen foxhole that if they survived, they'd open a place together. Joe never saw Christmas 1950, but Bill kept that promise in his own way, ordering the same breakfast every single morning for decades. His eyes drifted to the photographs on the wall. Milltown High football team, 1948. His homecoming from Korea in 1953. And a faded photo from 1984 showing him beside a teenage boy with angry eyes and a motorcycle, Daniel, his oldest son. The coffee tasted bitter that morning. Across town, Jake Morrison slammed his apartment door hard enough to rattle the walls. The eviction notice crumpled in his fist, the third one this month. His one-bedroom place on the east side wasn't much, but it was all Afghanistan, the divorce, and the drinking had left him. At 38, his face carried too many miles for his years. His hair stayed military short from habit, the Ranger tattoo on his forearm fading like his sense of purpose. He ignored the stack of bills, catching his reflection in the microwave door. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, a ghost of the soldier he'd been. His phone buzzed, the plant's HR department probably calling about his 3 no-shows. That assembly line job had been his lifeline after his 3rd tour. Mindless work that paid bills and asked nothing of his soul. Now even that was gone. The prescription bottle sat on his nightstand, pills for PTSD that made everything foggy. He'd stopped taking them regularly weeks ago. The nightmares returned immediately, vivid replays of the ambush in Helmand, the IED tearing through their vehicle, Captain Cooper shouting orders while blood soaked his uniform, Miller's face just before the end. Jake's hands shook as he swallowed a pill dry. He needed coffee, needed food, needed something to dull the edges of his unraveling world. The Victory Diner was 5 blocks away. Bill was halfway through his eggs when the bell chimed again. The silence that fell made him look up. Jake stood in the doorway, jacket rumpled, eyes scanning with combat veteran vigilance. Bill recognized that look immediately. He'd carried it himself for years after Korea. The younger man's gaze met his briefly, then slid away as he moved to the counter. "Morning, Rose." Jake's voice was rough. "Just coffee. Black." Rose's smile tightened as she poured. $1.75. Jake fumbled with his wallet, extracting a crumpled 5. "Can I get eggs, too, and toast?" "That'll be $8.95 total, Scott. Prices went up last month." The younger man stiffened. $8.95 for eggs and toast? You're kidding. It's on the new menu. "I'm sorry." As Jake dug through his pockets, coming up with loose change and lint, frustration mounted visibly. Bill watched with quiet concern, recognizing a man at the end of his rope. "I've got $3 here," Jake finally said, voice rising. "That's all I've got." "I'm sorry, Jake, but what?" His voice echoed. "But I should pay full price while this place goes under like everything else in this town. Or maybe I should go hungry because the VA's still processing my disability claim after 3 years." "Son," Bill said quietly, "that's enough." Jake's head snapped toward the booth. "What did you say to me, old man?" "I said that's enough." Bill's voice remained level. "The lady's just doing her job." For a moment, Jake seemed ready to back down. Then his eyes caught something in Bill's wallet on the table. A photograph of a young man in modern combat fatigues. "What, you got a soldier boy too?" His voice turned mocking. "Let me guess, a real American hero, not like the rest of us screw-ups." Bill's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "My son was a captain, 75th Rangers. He didn't come home. The diner went impossibly still. Jake should have stopped, but pain and anger had their own momentum." "Well, maybe he was the lucky one," Jake said. "Beats coming home to this." The collective gasp seemed to pull oxygen from the room. Bill stood slowly, movements deliberate, a lifetime of discipline evident. Jake rose too, younger, stronger, fueled by rage. Before anyone could intervene, he closed the distance in 3 strides. "Don't look at me like that," Jake growled. "You don't know me. Your generation had it easy. Came home to parades and pensions. We got nothing but empty thank yous and forms that never get processed." Bill didn't flinch. "You're angry. You have a right to be. Damn right I'm angry, and I'm sick of you Korean War dinosaurs judging us." The slap echoed through the diner. Jake's palm connected with Bill's cheek hard enough to turn the old man's head, leaving red fingerprints against pale skin. Time stopped. Rose's coffee pot crashed to the floor. Nobody moved. Bill slowly raised a hand to his face, touching the burning mark with gentle fingers. Genuine shock registered briefly, not from pain, but from the violation itself. The diner held its breath, waiting for violence. But Bill had buried better men than Jake when he was younger than Jake was now. He looked directly into the younger man's eyes. "I buried better men than you when I was younger than you are now," he said quietly, the words only for Jake. Confusion replaced rage in Jake's expression. Then shame began seeping in as reality hit. He'd struck an elderly veteran, but pride wouldn't let him apologize. Instead, he backed toward the door, jabbing a finger at Bill. "Your time is over, old man. World's moved on." The bell jangled as he left. Bill lowered himself back into the booth, hand on his cheek briefly before returning to his coffee. The entire episode lasted less than 3 minutes, but everyone knew they'd witnessed something significant. A clash between generations of soldiers separated by time and the changing nature of war itself. "Should I call the police?" Rose approached cautiously. "No," Bill said quietly. "No police. The boy's got demons enough." Rose hesitated, then nodded. "At least let me get you ice." As she hurried away, Bill's gaze drifted to the photograph on the wall. Himself and Daniel, 1984. The last time they'd spoken, before his son left at 17 with fire in his eyes and rebellion in his heart. Bill wondered if Daniel's anger had ever faded or just hardened into something permanent, like shrapnel that works deeper into flesh over time. The phone rang 3 minutes after Jake left. Rose answered, voice hushed as she glanced toward Bill. That was Thomas Bryant. He's on his way. Yes, he's still here. No, he wouldn't let me call police. Bill nodded, unsurprised. In a town like Milltown, news traveled fast. Thomas Bryant had been his radio operator after Joe died. The man Bill had dragged 200 yards through Chinese gunfire at Chosin, both leaving blood trails in the snow. Thomas had lost part of his left leg to frostbite, but survived to become police chief for 30 years. Rose approached again. Bill, I need to ask you something. It's not about the Bill. It's about Martha Henderson. She still has contact with her son in the Angels, doesn't she? Rose's eyes widened. Bill, I'm not calling the Hells Angels. Not about Jake, Bill said. About Daniel. Rose froze. In 20 years, she'd never heard Bill speak his son's name. You know Martha's boy rides with the same chapter? Bill's voice stayed steady. I need to know if he can get a message to Daniel. She studied him. It's been what? 37 years. Are you sure? 37 years, Bill corrected softly. And no, I'm not sure. But I'm 81. I'm running out of time to be sure about things. 200 miles away in Sturgis, Daniel Cooper sat in a corner of the Buffalo Chip Saloon, surrounded by the controlled chaos of the annual rally. At 56, he carried himself with confidence earned through 20 years of loyalty. His salt and pepper beard was neat, hands calloused from decades of engine work. The Hells Angels patches on his vest commanded respect. Vice President. Original chapter. The phone in his pocket vibrated. He stepped outside into warm August air thick with exhaust and grilled meat. The number wasn't one he recognized. Cooper, he answered. Daniel, it's Martha Henderson. His expression softened. Mom Henderson. Everything okay? There was a pause. No, honey. It's about your father. Daniel's jaw tightened, old reflexes awakening. What about him? There was an incident at Victory this morning. A young vet, troubled boy. He struck your father. The words hit like physical blows. Despite 37 years of silence, the thought of someone harming his father ignited something primal. Is he hurt? No, just shaken. But Daniel, Rose said he asked about you. Said he wanted to find a way to contact you. Daniel turned away from the saloon, walking toward rows of motorcycles. His own bike, a meticulously maintained 1989 Softail, stood among them, chrome gleaming. After all this time, his voice went quiet. Why now? I don't know, honey, but he's 81. Whatever happened between you two, maybe it's time. Daniel ran a hand over his beard. The last time he'd seen his father, August 17th, 1984. The day he enlisted in the Marines, his own act of rebellion. The argument had been nuclear, words that couldn't be unsaid. 2 weeks later, his belongings were packed in boxes, a silent message he was no longer welcome. He'd left the Marines after 4 years, drifted, found brotherhood in biker culture, never looked back, or so he told himself. The kid who hit him, Daniel said finally. You know anything about him? Jake Morrison, Afghanistan vet, Rangers, been having a rough time since he got back. PTSD, drinking, lost his job. Rangers, like Michael. The connection wasn't lost on Daniel. Mom Henderson, I need you to do something. Find out where this Morrison guy lives. Don't approach him, just get me an address, and tell Rose I'll be in touch. Daniel returned to the table where 5 angels waited. Brothers, something's come up. I need to head back east for a few days. Dean Walsh, the chapter president, raised an eyebrow. Everything all right? Daniel hesitated. My father was attacked by some troubled vet. I need to handle it. Your father. Dean's surprise was understandable. The Korean War guy, Medal of Honor recipient. Daniel corrected, though he never wore it. The men exchanged glances. You need company? asked Mike Rodriguez, former Force Recon Marine. Might not hurt to have friendly faces along. Voluntary only, though. It's personal business. All five nodded without hesitation. We'll roll at dawn, Daniel said. Full colors, long ride ahead. As evening settled over Milltown, Jake sat alone at last call, a dive bar that catered to those who preferred drinking without conversation. The whiskey did little to dull the shame gnawing inside. He'd struck an old man, not just any old man, but a veteran, a Medal of Honor recipient if rumors were true. And the father of Captain Cooper, the officer who'd saved Jake's life in Afghanistan at the cost of his own. Morrison, the bartender called. Phone for you. Jake frowned. Nobody should know he was here. Who is it? Didn't say. Just asked for you by name. Reluctantly, Jake made his way to the payphone. Hello? Jake Morrison. The voice was measured, authoritative. This is Thomas Bryant, former chief of police. Jake's stomach tightened. Look, if this is about the diner. It is and it isn't, Thomas interrupted. I'm not calling as a cop. I'm calling as someone who understands what you're going through better than you think. With respect, sir, I doubt that. I lost my leg at Chosin Reservoir in 1950, Thomas continued. Spent 2 years in VA hospitals. Came home to a country that had already forgotten there was a war on. Sound familiar? The parallel wasn't lost on Jake. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want to give you something. Information. Thomas's voice lowered. The man you struck today, Bill Cooper. He saved my life in Korea, dragged me through 200 yards of Chinese gunfire with a bullet in his own shoulder. They gave him the Medal of Honor for it, though he never wears it. Jake closed his eyes. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Bill doesn't advertise it. But here's what you really need to know. Captain Michael Cooper, the officer who died saving you and your unit in Helmand, he was Bill's son. Jesus Christ, Jake whispered. Bill's other son, Daniel, is on his way to Milltown with some of his biker friends, Hell's Angels. The implication was clear. Are you warning me to skip town? Thomas's laugh held no humor. Son, if running solved problems, I'd have suggested it years ago. No, I'm telling you because you deserve to know what's coming, and because Bill Cooper deserves better than what happened today. What am I supposed to do? That's up to you. But if I were in your boots, I'd sober up, clean yourself up, and find a way to make this right before it gets worse. Bill will be at Victory tomorrow morning, 8:15, same as always. He's reasonable, more reasonable than his son might be. The line went dead. Jake returned to his table, bypassing the whiskey glass. Through the grimy window, he could see Milltown's darkening streets. Captain Cooper had believed in him once, had seen something worth saving. Maybe it was time Jake looked for that something too. Bill couldn't sleep. The conversation with Thomas had left him restless. Daniel was coming home, not alone, but with his Hell's Angels brothers. Whether for reconciliation or retribution remained to be seen. At 3:17, Bill gave up entirely. He moved through the darkened house to the garage where his small workshop occupied the rear half. This was his sanctuary, where he restored vintage engines, finding peace in the mathematical certainty of pistons and gears. He flipped on lights. In the center, partially covered by canvas, sat his ongoing project, a 1967 Mustang in Highland Green. Bill had purchased the rusted shell 5 years ago, slowly bringing it back to life. The car had been Michael's dream. They'd talked about restoring one together when Michael retired from the army. Now Bill worked alone, a tribute to promises never fulfilled. He pulled back the tarp, running his hand along the fender. The body was nearly complete. Original V8 engine rebuilt. Only the interior remained unfinished. From a nearby workbench, Bill picked up a framed photograph of Michael in dress uniform, West Point graduation day. The proud smile, so like Margaret's. The determined shoulders, so like Bill's own. Your brother's coming home, Bill said quietly to the photograph. After all this time. He continued, giving voice to decades of held thoughts. I handled it wrong with him, with both of you. Expected too much. Bent you toward what I thought you should be instead of seeing what you were. His voice caught. You forgave me. Daniel never got the chance. Bill's gaze shifted to a metal lockbox on a high shelf. Inside was a key he'd kept for 37 years, the key to Daniel's 1982 Harley Sportster, the motorcycle that had been the final flashpoint. Bill had refused to accept Daniel's choice to join biker culture, had called it a waste of potential, failed to see that his son was seeking the same brotherhood Bill had found in war. By the time Bill understood his mistake, Daniel was gone. I hope I get it right this time, Bill said to the empty garage. Dawn broke over Milltown with golden clarity. Bill stood on his porch, coffee warming his hands. The rumble of engines broke the stillness as Daniel and three angels pulled into the driveway. They'd spent the night at the motor lodge, both men silently acknowledging they weren't ready for more. Daniel dismounted, removing his glasses. In clear morning light, the resemblance was striking. Same jaw, same steady gaze, same balanced stance. Morning, Dad, Daniel said. The term awkward after decades. Coffee's hot, Bill replied simply. The other angels remained by their bikes. Daniel nodded toward the garage. That where you keep it? The Mustang? Bill's expression softened. And your Sportster, both under tarps, well maintained. A ghost of a smile touched Daniel's lips. Always were meticulous about engines. Come inside. We need to talk about these VA investigators. The house hit Daniel like a force, not because it had changed, but because it hadn't. Same furniture, same photographs frozen in 1984, as if the house had been holding its breath. Jake's pickup pulled up behind the motorcycles. The younger veteran emerged looking marginally better, still haunted, but with purpose in his movements. Invited Morrison over early, Bill explained. Thought we should present a united front. Daniel's eyebrows rose. You trust him now? Bill paused. Trust is earned slowly, but a man deserves the chance to earn it. The message wasn't subtle. Thomas arrived at 9 with everything he knew. The VA team would arrive at 10, 2 investigators allegedly reviewing Medal of Honor citations for historical accuracy. What's their real agenda? Daniel asked. Politics, budget cuts, Bill said. Find a few medals to rescind. Claim the system's being audited. Thomas says they've already pulled 5 medals from Vietnam veterans on technicalities. Using heroes to save money, Jake said with disgust. That's low. It's about precedent, Bill corrected. Today it's career veterans too old to fight. Tomorrow it's Afghanistan, Iraq. Create doubt about who deserves recognition. Easier to deny it altogether. His eyes found Jake's. Easier to deny treatment too. 2 cars arrived. Thomas's contacts, elderly men who'd been at Chosin with Bill. Reynolds with his walker, Mackenzie in a wheelchair. Both were there the day Bill earned his medal. By 9:45, Bill's living room had transformed into a war council. They'll try to separate us, Thomas warned. We don't let that happen. The knock came firm, authoritative. Bill opened the door himself. 2 men in suits, credentials extended. Mr. Cooper, I'm Alan Mercer. This is Thomas Grant, Department of the Army. We're here about your Medal of Honor review. I know why you're here, Bill replied evenly. These are my witnesses. Whatever questions you have can be asked in front of all of them. Mercer's smile tightened. Standard procedure requires individual interviews. Thomas stepped forward. This isn't a criminal investigation. Either you conduct interviews with all of us present, or you explain to your superiors why you were denied access. Mercer assessed the room, noting the united front. Very well. They moved to the kitchen. Bill took the head position, Reynolds and Mackenzie to his right, Thomas to his left. Daniel stood behind his father's chair, Jake and the angels around the perimeter. Mr. Cooper, Mercer began, we're reviewing Medal of Honor citations for historical accuracy. Your citation states that on December 7th, 1950, near Chosin Reservoir, You voluntarily rescued 5 wounded Marines under heavy fire. Is that accurate? It is, Bill confirmed. And you performed these actions under orders from your commanding officer? The trap was set. Bill glanced at Reynolds and Mackenzie. Captain Peters conveyed the importance of leaving no man behind whenever possible. That's not what I asked. Did Captain Peters specifically order you to rescue those men? Before Bill could respond, Reynolds leaned forward. I was Bill's sergeant at Chosin. Captain Peters gave the official order to withdraw, yes, but he also made it clear off the record that he hoped someone would attempt recovery if tactical situation permitted. And you heard this directly? Mercer asked. I did, Reynolds confirmed, as did Mackenzie, our radio operator. Mackenzie nodded. Captain Peters said, and I quote, I can't order anyone back into that hellfire, but God help me, I can't order them to abandon our boys either. Then he looked directly at Corporal Cooper. Mercer frowned. That statement doesn't appear in official reports. Official reports rarely capture combat reality, Thomas interjected, as any veteran here can attest. We have testimony from another survivor, Walter Chen, that contradicts these recollections. Mercer pressed. Mr. Chen indicates Captain Peters explicitly ordered no rescue attempts. Walter Chen was suffering severe hypothermia and concussion when I found him, Bill replied. He was drifting in and out of consciousness. His recollection would naturally be compromised. And he's currently suffering advanced dementia, Thomas added pointedly, making recent testimony highly suspect. Are you accusing the department of fabricating evidence, Chief Bryant? I'm stating medical facts about Mr. Chen's condition, Thomas replied evenly, which you would have discovered had you bothered speaking with his physicians. The tension ratcheted higher. Mr. Cooper, Mercer said, returning focus to Bill, did you or did you not disobey a direct order? The question hung in the air. Bill had spent a lifetime avoiding discussions of his wartime experiences, minimizing his heroism. But now, with his comrades beside him, his son behind him, something shifted. Mr. Mercer, Bill began, voice steady. Let me tell you what happened at Chosin on December 7th, 1950, without bureaucratic language or technical distinctions. The room fell silent. It was 30 degrees below zero. Wind chill took it to -50. We'd been fighting 5 days straight, surrounded by Chinese forces that outnumbered us 10-1. Bill's eyes took on the distant look of a man seeing frozen hell. Our position was overrun at dawn. Captain Peters ordered fallback. During withdrawal, we realized several men were unaccounted for, pinned in a ravine about 300 yards from our new position. Chinese were sweeping the area. Bill's hands rested flat on the table. Captain Peters knew sending men back meant their deaths too. He couldn't order that sacrifice, but he looked at me just for a moment, and that look contained everything between men who understood leave no man behind. His gaze locked with Mercer's. So yes, technically I disobeyed the explicit order to withdraw, and yes, Captain Peters didn't explicitly order me back. But some orders transcend words. Some obligations exist beyond manuals. The raw honesty transformed the bureaucratic procedure into something profound. I didn't go back for a medal, Bill continued. I went back because those were my brothers, because I could hear them calling, because I knew if positions were reversed, they'd come for me. His voice softened. The medal came later after Captain Peters was killed. The citation was written by officers who weren't there, who needed a story of unambiguous heroism. Even Mercer seemed momentarily affected. Eric broke the silence. I think we're done here. My father has given you truth. What you do with it reflects on you, not him. Before Mercer could respond, Jake stepped forward, removing dog tags from beneath his shirt. Mr. Mercer, I'd like to enter something into your record. He placed them on the table. These belong to Captain Michael Cooper, Medal of Honor, U.S. Army Rangers, killed in Helmand Province, June 20th, 2012. He was my commanding officer, one of the men he saved. The revelation hung in the air. If you're questioning whether disobeying orders to leave men behind disqualifies someone from the Medal of Honor, Jake continued, then you'll need to review Captain Cooper's medal too, and countless others who made the same choice. Mercer gathered his papers slowly. Mr. Cooper, I believe we have sufficient clarification. He nodded toward the Medal of Honor pin Bill had removed from his collar. That belongs to you, sir, earned through actions that exemplify the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. We'll be concluding our review with a recommendation your citation remain unchanged. He extended his hand. Thank you for your service. Bill stood slowly, Daniel's hand steadying him, and accepted the handshake with dignified reserve. As Mercer and Grant departed, a collective exhalation passed through the room. Reynolds clasped Bill's arm, told them straight. About time. Thank you, all of you, Bill said simply. Eric squeezed his father's shoulder. We protect our own, Dad. You taught me that even when I was too stubborn to listen. 3 months later, Victory Diner hummed with Saturday morning energy. In the corner booth, 3 generations shared breakfast. Bill, now almost 82, looked subtly different, still reserved, but carrying himself with the slightly unburdened air of a man who had finally spoken long-held truth. Across from him sat Daniel, his visits now regular. Beside Daniel was Jake, whose haunted expression had eased somewhat. Transmissions finally running smooth, Jake was saying, had to rebuild it twice. Bill nodded approvingly. Knew you'd get it. Those Mustang transmissions are temperamental. Worth it, though, Daniel added. That car's going to be museum quality. The Mustang restoration had become their shared project. 3 days weekly, Jake worked in Bill's garage. Twice monthly, Daniel rode in from Pittsburgh. The arrangement wasn't perfect. Bill still had stubborn moments. Daniel still maintained aspects of life Bill struggled with. Jake still battled PTSD, but they were trying, reaching across generational divides, across different wars, across mistakes that might have remained permanent barriers. Rose approached with refills. You boys ready for the parade tomorrow? Tomorrow was Veterans Day. Milltown's parade would feature something new. Bill Cooper in the restored Mustang wearing his Medal of Honor publicly for the first time. Behind him would ride Daniel and his Angels contingent. Walking alongside in dress uniform would be Jake Morrison, connecting the generations. I still think this is unnecessary, Bill grumbled without real conviction. Daniel smiled slightly. It's not for you, Dad. It's for the town. For kids who need to understand what service means. For Michael, Jake added quietly, and for all the ones who didn't come home. Bill fell silent, acknowledging the truth. His personal discomfort had always been genuine, but he'd come to understand his story belonged not just to him, but to the community that needed such stories. As they finished breakfast, their conversation turned to practicalities. Final preparations, next restoration phase, Daniel's upcoming rally raising funds for veterans' mental health, ordinary discussions belying the extraordinary journey that brought them together. Bill glanced between his son and Jake, these two who had unexpectedly become his legacy and future. Different paths, different wars, different choices, yet bound by something transcending those differences. Not just blood or service, but shared understanding of standing for something larger than oneself. As they left, Bill paused on the sidewalk, looking at clear autumn sky. For a brief moment, he imagined Margaret and Michael watching from beyond that blue expanse, seeing family reunited, connections restored, legacy continued in ways none could have predicted. Ready, Dad? Daniel asked, Mustang keys in hand. Bill nodded, falling into step between his son and the young veteran who'd become part of their story through unlikely chains of service, sacrifice, and eventual reconciliation. Behind them, Victory Diner's sign glowed in morning sun, the repaired letters whole again, like the family it had witnessed, coming apart and together across decades. The bell jingled as other customers entered, Simple sound marking transitions in the continuing story of Milltown and three generations who'd found their way back to each other. Not through grand gestures, but through patient work of restoration, of vintage cars, of fractured families, of wounded spirits, one careful adjustment at a time, until what had been broken ran smooth again, carrying them forward together into whatever lay ahead.